In the old kingdoms, justice was not given. It was taken, not by courts, not by kings, by those patient enough to wait, and clever enough to strike when the time was right. This is scrolls of vengeance, and this scroll has been sealed for centuries. Until now. I remember the exact color of the sky when they killed my husband. It was the blue of robin's eggs, the blue of forget-me-nots in spring, the kind of blue that belongs on days when children are born and lovers are wed and nothing bad is supposed to happen. But bad things don't care about the color of the sky. If you are already gripped, take a second to like and subscribe. 97% of listeners forget, but it helps the team keep these stories alive. All right, let's keep going. My name is Elara. I was 23 years old when Sir Roderick Thorne rode into our village with 40 men and burned our world to ash. I was 23 when I watched the man I loved die in the dirt with a sword through his chest. I was 23 when I was dragged by my hair across the cobblestones and thrown over a horse like a sack of grain. I was 23 when I became a prize. Thomas and I had been married for 2 years. We weren't wealthy. We weren't important. He was a blacksmith's son who had inherited his father's forge. I was a weaver's daughter who could make cloth sing beneath my fingers. We lived in a small cottage at the edge of the village, and our greatest ambition was to someday have enough children to fill it with laughter. That morning, Thomas had kissed me before dawn. His lips were warm. His hands smelled of iron and fire. He told me he would finish early and we would walk to the river together, the way we did when we were courting. "I'll bring bread," I said. "I'll bring wine," he promised. He never came home. The first warning was the smoke. It rose from the eastern fields like a grey serpent, coiling upward into that perfect blue sky. Then came the screaming. Then came the thunder of hooves. By the time I ran outside, the village was already dying. I saw Thomas across the square. He had grabbed a hammer from his forge, not a weapon, just the tool of his trade, the only thing within reach. He was standing between the soldiers and a group of children who had been playing near the well. He wasn't a warrior. He had never held a sword in his life. But he stood there anyway, this beautiful, foolish, brave man I had married, and he raised that hammer like it could stop an army. Sir Roderick Thorne didn't even slow his horse. The sword came down in a silver arc. Thomas crumpled. The hammer fell from his fingers and rang against the stones, a bell tolling for everything I had lost. I screamed his name. I ran toward him. I don't remember deciding to run. My body simply moved, drawn to him like water to the sea. I made it 3 steps before someone grabbed my hair and yanked me backward. I fell, the world spun, boots surrounded me, laughter surrounded me, and through the chaos I saw Sir Roderick dismount and walk toward where Thomas lay bleeding. He wasn't dead yet, my husband, my Thomas. His eyes found mine across the square, and in them I saw everything, love and fear and sorrow and a desperate apology for leaving me alone in this burning world. Sir Roderick kicked him onto his back, looked down at him the way a man looks at an insect. "Brave," the knight said, "stupid but brave." Then he drove his sword through Thomas's heart, and the light left my husband's eyes, and the sky was still blue, still beautiful, still completely indifferent to the fact that my soul had just been torn in half. They put me in a cage with 7 other women. The cage was meant for livestock. It smelled of animals and fear, and the sweat of bodies pressed too close together. We rattled along muddy roads for 3 days, given water twice and food once, while the soldiers laughed and placed bets on which of us would fetch the highest price. I didn't speak, I didn't cry. I sat in the corner of that cage and I held Thomas's face in my mind like a prayer, memorizing every detail before it could fade. The way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, the scar on his chin from a childhood fall, the calluses on his hands that were rough against my skin but always gentle. I held on to him, and I made a promise. On the 4th day we arrived at Sir Roderick's castle. It rose from the hills like a stone fist, all towers and battlements and banners snapping in the wind. The other women wept when they saw it. They knew what awaited them, servitude at best, horrors at worst. I didn't weep. I studied the walls, the gates, the guards and their rotations, the layout of the courtyards, the faces of the servants who watched our arrival with dead eyes that had seen this before. I was no longer a weaver's daughter. I was no longer a blacksmith's wife. I was something new, something that had been forged in fire and loss and a hatred so pure it felt like peace. I was a weapon, I just didn't know yet how I would be used. Sir Roderick chose me personally. He walked along the line of captives like a man selecting fruit at market, lifting chins, examining teeth, running his hands over bodies that flinched from his touch. When he reached me, I did not flinch. He tilted my face toward the light, studied my eyes. Something flickered in his expression, curiosity perhaps, or the recognition of a challenge. "This one has fire," he said to his steward. "I'll keep her for the household." His steward made a note. Just like that, my fate was decided. I was bathed, dressed in servant's clothes, given a small room in the east wing with a narrow bed and a window that looked out over the courtyard where prisoners were sometimes executed. I was told I would serve wine at the Lord's table. I would pour drinks for the man who had murdered my husband, and I would smile while I did it. Do you know how hard it is to smile at someone you want to kill? The muscles of your face become foreign. Your lips feel like they belong to a stranger. Every curve upward is a lie, and every lie costs a piece of your soul. I paid that price every single day for 7 years. I learned Sir Roderick's habits with the precision of a scholar studying sacred texts. I knew when he woke, before dawn, restless from dreams he never discussed. I knew when he ate, 3 meals a day, heavy on meat, light on vegetables, always accompanied by wine from the southern vineyards. I knew when he drank too much, which was often, especially after battles or negotiations that hadn't gone his way. I knew his cruelties, the way he struck servants for minor mistakes, the way he spoke of the villages he had conquered, the families he had broken, the lives he had ended, all with the casual tone of a man discussing the weather. I knew his vanities, the mirror he checked before every public appearance, the way he angled his jaw to hide the softening beneath his chin, the hunger in his eyes when younger knights received praise he felt should be his. And I knew his blind spots. He never suspected the servants. To him, we were furniture. We moved through his world carrying trays and emptying chamber pots and lighting candles, and he looked through us like we were made of glass. That invisibility was my greatest weapon. I smiled, I poured, I waited. Not obviously. I couldn't very well ask the castle healer to teach me which herbs stopped the heart, but I could listen, I could watch. I could volunteer for tasks that brought me close to knowledge. I worked in the kitchens for a season, learning which mushrooms were safe and which would kill a grown man in hours. I tended the castle garden, memorizing which flowers were beautiful and which were deadly. I befriended the old woman who made medicines for the household, sitting at her feet like a devoted student while she explained the properties of nightshade and hemlock and monkshood. "Why do you want to know such dark things?" she asked me once. I smiled my practiced smile. "So I can avoid them, of course. I would never want to accidentally harm someone." She believed me. Everyone believed me. I had become so good at lying that sometimes I forgot what truth felt like. In the 3rd year, I saved Sir Roderick's life. A visiting lord had arrived with an assassin hidden among his retinue. I noticed the man's eyes, the way they tracked Sir Roderick with too much focus, the way his hand kept drifting toward his belt where a knife was surely concealed. I could have let it happen. I could have watched my captor die and felt justice settle over me like a warm blanket. But it wasn't the right time. It wasn't my hand. It wasn't personal enough. So I spilled wine on the assassin, made a clumsy scene, drew attention to him at the moment he was preparing to strike. The guards found his knife. He was executed in the courtyard the next morning. Sir Roderick summoned me to his chambers. "You saved my life," he said, looking at me differently now, not through me, at me. I bowed my head. "I serve my lord faithfully." "Why? I destroyed your village, killed your husband. Why would you protect me?" I looked up, met his eyes, let him see something that looked like acceptance, like a woman who had made peace with her fate. "My husband is dead," I said. "Nothing changes that, but I am alive, and I choose to live well in whatever circumstances God has given me." He studied me for a long moment. Then he laughed, a genuine laugh, surprised and almost warm. "You are wiser than most," he said. "From now on you will serve only me, my personal attendant. You've earned my trust." I bowed again to hide the smile that threatened to break through. Not the practiced smile. The real one. Being Sir Roderick's personal attendant meant being close to him always. I woke before he did and prepared his chambers. I laid out his clothes. I poured his morning wine and his evening wine and every wine in between. I stood behind his chair at banquets and accompanied him on journeys and knew his schedule better than he knew it himself. I also knew his secrets. The letters he wrote to enemies of the crown, hedging his bets in case the king should fall. The bribes he accepted from merchants seeking favourable treatment. The bastard children scattered across 3 provinces, each one denied and hidden. The bodies buried in the forest beyond the eastern wall, rivals and inconveniences who had simply disappeared. Sir Roderick was not merely a murderer. He was a monster wrapped in silk and courtesy, and the kingdom celebrated him as a hero. He had received commendations from the king. He had been granted lands and titles. He was spoken of as a great man, a noble knight, a defender of the realm. And every night I poured his wine and smiled, and imagined his face when he finally understood who I was. In the 5th year, he tried to make me his mistress. "You've been faithful," he said, his hand on my arm, his breath sour with drink. "Loyal, I could give you more, better quarters, fine dresses, a position of honor." I felt my skin crawl beneath his touch, but I kept my face composed. "My lord honors me," I said carefully, "but I am a simple woman I am content to serve." His eyes narrowed. For a moment I thought he would insist. Sir Roderick was not a man who heard no often. But something in my expression, some perfect calibration of humility and quiet dignity, made him pause. "Perhaps that's what I admire about you," he said finally. "You want nothing, everyone else wants something, it makes them predictable, controllable." He released my arm. "You remain a mystery, Elara, I find that refreshing." I bowed and retreated to my place against the wall. My hands were shaking, but only I knew it. In the 7th year, Sir Roderick was granted the highest honour of his career. The king himself was coming to the castle. A grand banquet would be held to celebrate Sir Roderick's appointment as Warden of the Eastern Marches, the most powerful military position in the kingdom. Lords and ladies from across the realm would attend. It would be the greatest night of his life. I knew the moment I heard the news. This was it. This was the night. I spent weeks preparing. I cultivated a particular mushroom in a hidden corner of the garden, one that looked identical to a common edible variety, but carried death in its flesh. I ground it to powder and kept it in a small vial sewn into the hem of my dress. I tested quantities on rats, adjusting until I knew exactly how much was needed. Not too little, that would only make him sick. Not too much, that might act too quickly before he could understand what was happening. I needed him to have time. Time to feel his body failing. Time to realize what was happening. Time to look at me and finally see who I was. The night of the banquet arrived with all the pageantry the kingdom could muster. Hundreds of candles turned the great hall into a sea of gold. Musicians played. Lords and ladies danced. The tables groaned with food and wine and the wealth of a man who had built his fortune on the grave of innocence. Sir Roderick sat at the head table, basking in adoration. He wore his finest armour, polished to mirror brightness. The king himself had toasted him, calling him a pillar of the realm and an example to all knights. I stood behind his chair, as I had stood for 7 years. Invisible, patient, ready. The evening reached its peak when Sir Roderick rose to speak. The hall fell silent. Every eye turned to him, the hero, the legend, the man who had carved his name into history with blood and fire. "My friends," he began, his voice carrying across the hall, "tonight I am honoured beyond words. The king has granted me a responsibility I will carry with pride until my dying day." Dying day, the words hung in the air like a prophecy. "I want to thank those who have served me faithfully, those who have stood by my side through battle and peace, those who have asked for nothing and given everything." He turned, looked at me, and for the first time in 7 years he truly saw me. "Elara," he said, "my most loyal servant, bring me my cup. I would drink to this moment with the finest wine we have." The hall murmured approval. What a gracious lord, they thought, what humility. To acknowledge a servant in such a moment. I stepped forward, took his golden goblet from the table, walked to the side table where the finest wine waited in a crystal decanter. My back was to the crowd. No one could see what I was doing. I poured the wine deep red, the colour of old blood, and from the hem of my dress I produced the vial. The powder dissolved instantly, leaving no trace. I carried the goblet back to Sir Roderick, knelt before him, held it up with both hands the way a supplicant offers tribute to a king. "My lord," I said, "may this night be everything you deserve." He smiled, took the goblet, raised it high. "To victory," he proclaimed, "to honor, to a legacy that will never be forgotten." The hall echoed his toast. Goblets rose throughout the room. The sound of celebration filled the air. Sir Roderick drank deeply, and I watched. Not out of mercy, there was no mercy in my heart, but because I wanted him to understand. I wanted him to have time to know with absolute certainty that this was not an accident, that this was justice, that this was me. The first sign came an hour later. He coughed just once, covered it with a laugh and reached for more wine that I made certain was clean. I needed him to know it wasn't the wine, not exactly. The second sign came during the dancing. He stumbled barely, just a half step, but I saw it. His hand went to his chest, then dropped away as if nothing had happened. The third sign came when he tried to speak with the king. His words slurred, just slightly, just enough that I noticed. The king frowned and asked if he was well. "Perfectly well," Sir Roderick said, "perhaps too much celebration." But I saw the fear beginning to dawn in his eyes, the confusion, the realization that something was very, very wrong. By the time the guests began to depart, he could barely stand. His steward rushed to his side. "My lord, you need the healer." "No," Sir Roderick's voice was a rasp. "Take me to my chambers and bring," his eyes found me in the crowd, "bring her." I followed as they half carried him up the winding stairs. I watched as they laid him on his bed, the same bed where he had planned and celebrated and never once lost sleep over the lives he had destroyed. The steward wanted to stay. Sir Roderick sent him away. "Leave us," he commanded. "She will attend to me." The door closed. We were alone. He looked at me from his bed, sweat beading on his forehead, his breath coming in shallow gasps. "Something is wrong," he said. "I can feel it, my heart is, I can't." I pulled a chair close to his bedside, sat down, folded my hands in my lap. "Do you remember Thornhaven?" I asked. My voice was calm, conversational, as if we were discussing the weather. He blinked, confused. "What?" "Thornhaven, a small village on the eastern border. You raided it 7 years ago, burned it to the ground, killed everyone who resisted." His face twisted, trying to remember, trying to place the name among all the villages he had destroyed. There had been so many. They had all blurred together. "I don't. Why are you asking me this?" "Because I'm from Thornhaven," I said. "Because my husband was a blacksmith named Thomas. Because he stood between your sword and a group of children, and you cut him down like he was nothing." Recognition flickered, not of me, of the story. His eyes widened. "You kicked him onto his back," I continued. "You said he was brave but stupid. Then you drove your sword through his heart while he was looking at me." "Elara," he tried to rise, failed. "Elara, I watched him die," I said. "I watched the light leave his eyes, and I made a promise, Sir Roderick. I promised that you would pay, not quickly, not mercifully, but personally, by my hand." His breathing grew more labored. His hands clutched at his chest. "The wine," he gasped. "You poisoned the wine." "I poisoned your wine," I corrected. "The wine I poured for you, the wine you drank to toast your own greatness." Tears leaked from his eyes. Whether from pain or fear or the sudden weight of understanding, I couldn't tell. I didn't care. "Please," he whispered. "There must be an antidote. I'll give you anything. Gold, land, freedom, just..." "Freedom," I laughed. The sound surprised me. I had forgotten what my real laugh sounded like. "I've been free since the moment I decided you would die. Everything else was just waiting." His hand reached for me, grasping, desperate. I didn't move away. I took his hand, held it gently, almost tenderly. "Thomas forgave everyone," I said softly. "He was kind that way. He would probably even forgive you." Sir Roderick's eyes found hope in my words. "But I'm not Thomas," I continued. "I'm what you made me, and I will never forgive, I will never forget, and now, finally, neither will you." His breathing slowed, his grip on my hand weakened. He tried to speak, tried to form words, but his body was beyond his control now. The poison had done its work. I leaned close, close enough to whisper in his ear. "Your last toast was to victory," I said, "to honor, to a legacy that would never be forgotten." I pulled back, looked into his fading eyes. "You were right about one thing, this night will never be forgotten, but not the way you imagined. Every time they tell the story of Sir Roderick Thorne, they'll wonder, was it really illness that took him, or was it something else, someone else?" His mouth moved, no sound came out. They'll look at their servants differently. They'll taste their wine and wonder if this is the night, if this is the cup, if this is the price for all the villages they've burned and all the lives they've taken. I stood, straightened my dress, walked to the side table and poured a cup of wine, clean wine, for myself. I raised it toward him. To Thomas, I said, the bravest man I ever knew, the love of my life, the reason I'm standing here and you're dying there. I drank. Sir Roderick's eyes followed the cup. His chest heaved once, twice. And then he was still. I stood there for a long moment, looking at the body of the man who had haunted my nightmares for 7 years. He looked smaller in death, weaker, just flesh and bone and all the evil that had animated him seeping out like smoke from an extinguished fire. I didn't feel joy. I had expected joy. I had dreamed of joy. What I felt was quieter than that, deeper. Peace. I set down my cup, walked to the door, opened it. The steward was waiting outside, packing anxiously. He's gone, I said, letting my voice tremble, letting tears fill my eyes. He clutched his chest and I couldn't do anything. I tried, but I couldn't. The steward rushed past me. I heard his cry of anguish, heard him shouting for the healer, for the guards, for someone to do something. But there was nothing to be done. Sir Roderick Thorne was dead. And I was free. The castle fell into chaos. The king's visit had turned into a tragedy. Healers were summoned. Investigations were launched. Every servant was questioned. I told my story perfectly. I had been with him when he collapsed. I had done everything I could. I was devastated. He had been a great man and I had served him faithfully for 7 years. They believed me. Of course they believed me. I was a servant, I was a woman, I was invisible. Within a week, the household was dissolved. Sir Roderick had no legitimate heirs. His lands reverted to the crown. The servants were released with small purses of coin and letters of reference. I walked out of that castle on a spring morning, carrying nothing but the clothes on my back and the satisfaction of a promise kept. I didn't look back. The road stretched before me, leading south toward lands Sir Roderick had never touched. Places where no one knew my face or my history. Places where I could be anyone. As I walked, I thought about Thomas. Not his death, his life. The way he laughed at my terrible jokes. The way he sang while he worked, off-key but joyful. The way he held me in the dark when the nightmares came, even before he knew what the nightmares were about. I had carried his memory like a coal in my chest for 7 years, using it to fuel my hatred. Now, for the first time, I let myself remember him with love instead of grief. I did it, I whispered to the empty road. I told you I would. The wind carried my words away, but somewhere, somehow, I knew he heard. I settled in a village called Millbrook, 3 weeks' walk from Sir Roderick's territory. I told them I was a widow, which was true. I told them I was a weaver, which was also true. My mother had taught me before she died, and my hands remembered the craft even after years of serving wine. I built a small cottage, planted a garden, made cloth that the village women praised for its quality. Slowly, carefully, I built a new life from the ashes of the old. Years passed. The story of Sir Roderick's death became a legend, a cautionary tale about excess and hubris. Some versions said he choked on his own gluttony. Others claimed God struck him down for secret sins. A few whispered about poison, but no one ever suspected the truth. The truth was sitting in a small cottage in Millbrook, weaving cloth and growing vegetables, and finally learning what peace felt like. I never married again, not because I didn't meet good men, I did. But Thomas had my heart and I didn't have another to give. Instead, I poured my love into other things. I taught the village children to read. I tended the sick when fever came. I held the hands of dying women and told them they were loved. I became known as a kind woman, a wise woman, a woman who had clearly known sorrow but had somehow found her way back to the light. They weren't wronged, but they never knew the whole truths. They never knew about the darkness I had walked through, the things I had done, the man I had killed with a smile on my face and a prayer in my heart. They never knew that their gentle weaver was also a murderer. But I knew, and I made my peace with it. Because some monsters deserve to be destroyed, and some women have no choice but to become the sword. On the 7th anniversary of Sir Roderick's death, I walked to the river near Millbrook. It was sunset, the water was golden, birds sang in the trees overhead. I carried a cup of wine, good wine, the best I could afford. I knelt at the water's edge, poured half the wine into the current. For you, Thomas, I said, for every day we should have had, for the children we never got to raise, for the life that was stolen from us. I watched the wine swirl away, carrying my words downstream out to the sea, up to wherever souls go when they leave us. Then I raised my cup. And for me, I said, for surviving, for waiting, for finishing what needed to be done. I drank. The wine was sweet on my tongue. The evening was warm. The past was finally, truly behind me. I sat there until the stars came out, until the village lights twinkled in the distance, until the world felt whole again, even with its cracks and scars. Then I walked home. And for the first time in 7 years, I didn't dream of fire. I dreamed of Thomas, smiling at me across a sun-drenched kitchen, holding out his hand. Come, he said, walk with me to the river. And even though I knew it was just a dream, I took his hand. And I never let go. And so the scroll closes. But the archive is vast, and many reckonings remain untold. If this tale stirred something in you, a memory of your own patience, your own waiting, your own justice yet to come, leave your mark in the comments below. Tell me, what would you have done? Subscribe to the Chronicle. Ring the bell so you never miss a reckoning. The next scroll is already being prepared. Until then, may your patience outlast your enemies. The kingdom forgets. The scrolls remember.